go.
Alright, thank you everybody for making it out for another week, our last week. I think most of you have been here for like the whole journey with us, so thank you. I don't think we need to introduce ourselves again. My name's Alyssa, for all who forgot. That's Evan. We're glad y'all made it out. You go ahead, unless you want to add anything else.
Nah. If y'all don't know me at this point, that's okay. Many questions about my personhood, we can talk later, I suppose. But today we're going to be talking about forgiveness. Talking about forgiveness. It's a very important topic. So this is kind of our outline for how we're going to go at it this week. We're going to talk about dissecting unforgiveness. There's some core elements of unforgiveness that we need to understand on the process so we are able to forgive. Then there's some common myths about forgiveness, 2 types of forgiveness, and a model for forgiveness. As you can tell from the last 3 points, they sound very official. That's going to be heard. The very kind of gruff, dissecting unforgiveness. That's going to be my little 2 cents about the whole thing. So I'm really excited about that. So let's kind of unravel the core parts of unforgiveness. Here are the things that we're going to talk about today. When we're thinking about issues with forgiving, we need to. I was thinking to myself, so okay, how are we going to go about this? Because unforgiveness is a thing. A lot of people, we have people that have frustrated us, or they cause issues or problems, and we might bitter some negative feelings toward that person. And so I was thinking, okay, what are some things that can contribute to those negative feelings, or some things that could stand as a hindrance for bringing us back into unity and being reconciled, no matter what the type of relationship is. And after some meditation, after some prayer, here are some major core elements that stood out to me. A lot of the reason why an offense or unforgiveness can continue to happen is mismanaged emotions, poor communication, and unmet expectations. And as we go into these different points here, we're going to kind of see how they all come together. So let's talk about mismanaged emotions. So, for my part of this, my goal is to help prepare us to have the right mindset to forgive. There are certain key ideas and principles that we need to have running and operating in the back of our mind if we're going to be a person that is forgiving and dispensing grace to another person. And so, a good starting point. We understand relationships are they're voluntary integration of multiple lives. And why is that important? Well, it's the voluntary piece. Remember, you chose to enter into this covenant, this relationship, this arrangement. You chose. And so there's a bit of accountability on your part. And then there's the integration part. When you have 2 people, where there's no 2 people on the planet that are exactly the same, which is phenomenal. We have over 7 billion people on the planet, and no 2 people are the same, even twins. That being said, when we have these 2 distinct lives coming together, there's going to be some issues. There's going to be some frustrations. The Bible says that offenses will come, and so we have to recognize that. And so because of that, when we do have these conflicts, our emotions tend to get involved, right? And we have different levels of sensitivities, which is fine, which is totally okay. And right now, like I said, I'm just giving you some ideas, some principles that we have in the back of our mind. When you're in a relationship, whatever the type of relationship that is, we'll talk about intimate relationships. When there's 2 people that are involved, we have different levels of sensitivity. We all feel emotions differently. Some people are very in tune with their emotions, and they feel very deeply. And so a situation can happen and both parties be upset, but one can feel very deeply, and that's fine. It's not a problem to have emotions. That's totally acceptable. But regardless of how we feel, because we are voluntarily choosing to be in these relationships, we have a responsibility to behave appropriately in spite of how we feel. The problem comes in is, let's say there's some conflict and there's some issue, and so now one person is hurt or offended, and now they have these emotions of anger and sadness and betrayal, and so because of these feelings, they decide within themselves, I'm going to either isolate myself, I'm going to distance myself, I'm going to do things that aren't conducive for us to working through these conflicts. I'm going to harbor feelings of unforgiveness. We all have it, and this is where I'm going with that. It's okay to have feelings. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be angry. But the key is to act in such a way that's going to bring the relationship closer together after the conflict, but not in a way that's going to drive us apart. And so just to throw a quick 5 cents in on that, we all need a healthy outlet for our emotions. You got to find that healthy outlet. You got to find a way to release those emotions, because we talked about it last week. And as we go further into the lesson, we're seeing more and more repeating themes, because all these ideas build on each other. If emotions are not handled correctly in a time of conflict, it causes unforgiveness and separation. Gotta manage our emotions. Once again, I'm saying this 100 times because we live in a type of culture where, particularly among certain groups, where it might not be okay to have emotions. It is okay to have emotions. It is okay to have feelings. It's okay to feel. None of those things are wrong. It's a matter of what we do with them. So mismanaged emotions. And so, another issue that causes unforgiveness, or another thing that can cause these problems or these conflicts, or it's a lot of times at the root, there is some poor communication. I know this sounds familiar, and it should, and it's very intentional. All these things kind of come together. When there's an issue or a conflict that arises, and we fail to reconcile, to come back together, to be reunified after a conflict, there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. And one of the major ones is failure to communicate. And so you have this situation where you have someone who has a whole lot of feelings that are all different types of extremes on top of a poorly communicated message. That's a recipe for issues, you know? And so it's important. That's why we talked about the emotional management component. We want to get our emotions kind of managed and find a healthy outlet and don't make decisions according to our emotions. But also communication. And I know this sounds very similar to the conflict resolution. Everything, they go hand in hand, and that's totally fine. And so what happens oftentimes is there's a failure to communicate wants and desires. And there's a failure to understand wants and desires. And so there's some issue that happens. And let's say, some arbitrary example, there's some clothes that she'd like for me to take to the thrift store to get rid of because they're making the house cluttered. And so, no. There's I have an even better example. This just happened. Okay, so this is great. Okay. So we were preparing for this PowerPoint, right? And there's a lack of communication. And there caused an issue, and we could have let this totally damper our whole day, and then I could have did that cold shoulder thing where I'm like, I'm about to swerve her all day because I'm mad at her. Let me tell you what happened, right? So we were preparing for this presentation, and she told me, her words were like, I'm going to edit your part of the slides. If y'all don't know my history, I make a lot of spelling errors, like very frequently. As an ongoing joke among my friends, I make a lot of spelling errors when I create presentations. And so she said, hey, I'm going to edit this. And so she's communicating to me that, hey, I'm going to edit this. And so we have, our expectations are here. we just need these things to be edited, we just need these things to be set in order, and then we're good to go. I thought just grammar, spelling, the basic stuff like that were cool. And so she's like showing me the PowerPoint, and she showed me all these pictures that she added, and all these different arrangements, and I felt some type of way. I was like, I thought you said you were going to edit it. Why are you adding all these pictures? I didn't want these pictures up here. And so we had miscommunication. I'm kind of particular about some things when it comes to presentation, and because I wanted to use the pictures as teaching points. And she had all these extra pictures, and so I didn't communicate to her that the pictures that I have were for teaching purposes. And so there's lack of communication on my part, and there's lack of communication on her part. Was when she said edit, she meant design, and she meant change everything around, get it all professional. She didn't really mean edit. And so there was a lack of communication. And so naturally, how did I feel? I got frustrated. I was wroth within me. I felt hot. Face got hot. I was like, "Girl, what you doing? All this stuff. I didn't ask you to do any of this, man." And I felt some type of way. I had to stop. I had to think within myself. It's okay that I'm upset. It's okay that I have these emotions. They're real. Now, do I want to treat her according to how I feel? If that's the case, throw the laptop against the wall and be like, "No, that's not what I asked for." I'm joking. I'm not explosive anger kind of guy. I'm a low, slow burn. I don't get expressively angry. But I decided that, you know what? There was just a miscommunication. And so instead of allowing myself to be taken away by my many emotions that were welling up in my being, I said, let's just have a conversation. And we had an amazing discussion that ended up with us looking up the definition of the word edit, and arrange and make pretty was not in the definition. But that's okay. We made light of it, we laughed, and we had a good time. And the PowerPoint was restored back to its former glory. And so, communication. And it's so easy. See, the problem there wasn't intent on her part. She wasn't trying to be malicious. And, and I felt misunderstood. And I felt like the labor that I put, there was a whole lot of different emotions that were going in play. But it took a moment for me just to stop and kind of just get back to the root issue. I could have been upset that whatever happened had happened, but instead, I decided to shift the focus back to the miscommunication. That way, we can, once that's squared away, now we have an understanding when we go forward, and once we've identified what the miscommunication was, now when we go forward, and she says, "Hey, I'm going to edit your work." Now I know she means just the grammar. Now if she wants to design and make it pretty, "Hey, I'm going to decorate and I'm going to enhance your portion and we're going to make it look beautiful." Now she'll be more specific with her words, and that we won't run into this issue because we're able to identify the core miscommunication. And now, here's my last point, the point that I'm the most excited about. My goodness, this is really excited about this. This is going to be really, 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 really helpful. If you guys take away anything from my portion tonight, this is the takeaway. My goodness, if you get this one slide, it's going to make a world of difference. If you get one slide. Oftentimes, unforgiveness happens because of unmet expectations. Unmet expectations causes problems, it causes conflict, it causes unforgiveness, it can cause bitterness, because in your mind, person is supposed to be A, B, C, or D. If you listen to anyone who's had issues with a parent growing up and they're an adult and they're reflecting back, it's always, my mom or dad should have been this, and this, and they failed to be all those things. I was robbed of my childhood. This is how it impacted me because they deviated from what I expected them to be. It is so important that when you're in a relationship, you have proper expectations. And I'm going to give you these two, and my goodness, apply this to every relationship that you have, of all types. Your partner is not God. And oftentimes, we expect them to be. And let's say you want to take all of the religious jargon all out of it. We expect our partner to be some ideal, this perfect being that we have imagined. And they're supposed to emulate this perfection. They cannot. Because of expectation adjustment number 2. Humans are imperfect. When you meet a perfect person, please let me know. I would love to interview this person because no such human being exists. I promise you, humans are not, they're not perfect. Because the moment you start viewing your partner as so, it creates really unnecessarily high expectation, which is going to lead to a lot of disappointment. So let's kind of examine each one of those individually. And so, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is an idea, what he was, a sociologist, a psychologist? I forget what he was. He was some healthcare professional that dealt with mental health, and he categorized the different level of needs that humans have, and starting from the bottom or just basic to kind of to get by, and everyone needs the ones like, I guess, necessity, if you will, are at the bottom. And as it gets toward the top, they're not necessary to live life, but you get more out of life to more that you get fulfilled, right? And so, I wish I had a pointer, this would be great. But right here, when it says esteem and higher, that stuff comes from God. Esteem and higher. If you're looking to a person for your esteem needs and your self-actualization needs, you are setting that relationship up for failure. You cannot get that from another person. Your partner can make you feel secure. They can probably make you feel safe. And they can provide intimate relationships where you feel belonged and you feel loved. And people can provide all of those things. But starting to go a little bit beyond that, it gets really difficult for human beings to fill those shoes. Particularly at the very top there. It says that achieving one's full potential. We have to understand that we all have a God-given purpose. And that purpose is to create a beautiful world. It's to work hand in hand with other human beings and to create a beautiful world. And God's given us the beautiful principles of the Bible to assist in that process, but we're supposed to be creating a beautiful world. That's our purpose. Oftentimes, though, we go to find our sense of meaning in other people. And the reason why I bring up that sense of purpose is because joy comes from fulfilling and satisfying your sense of purpose. When you have that feeling like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm existing in the way that I'm supposed to be existing, you start to feel this sense of joy. You cannot get that from a human being. And if you try to, your emotional landscape is going to look like this. It's going to be a roller coaster because one day they're doing really, really great. They're giving you all this attention and they're doing this, this, and this, and this, and this. And then, my goodness, they get a cold and now they're having an off day. Now they can't be everything that you want them to be. And so now you're feeling like this. Your emotions are down. They're in the pooper, because, they're human. We can't get our joy from a person. Absolutely ridiculous. There's no way, because it's going to set you up for failure. And so Philippians, Paul, he tapped into that. He talks about, this is a wonderful verse that a lot of people love to use inappropriately, but that's okay. I'm going to help orient us for us. It talks about, I can do all things through Christ. And that's like everybody's motivational get up and go and, I'm going to start that business and I'm going to do this, this, and this. And I can do all things through Christ. Let's get a little bit of context for that. He said, not that I speak in respect of one, for I have learned in whatsoever state that I'm in, therewith to be content. Being content. And he talks about it's almost abounding in success and being abased and having nothing. And we're talking about the same man who was the top of the social strata of his particular community. He went from there to being totally ostracized and driven out of cities. All right, so he's been the highest in the social stratus, and he's been at the lowest, in absolute lows. And no matter where he was, he had an inner sense of peace and contentment because he understood that that contentment, it comes from Christ. It wasn't in the eyes and the acceptance of people. It wasn't because of all the personal relationships that he had, because he understood that as long as I'm walking in my purpose, I'm doing what I know that I'm supposed to be doing, no matter what's going on outside of me. No matter how my individual relationships are going, no matter how all these different variables may change, I'm walking in my purpose. Therefore, I have inner peace and joy. That's what he's talking about. He said, I can be poor and I can be rich, and I'm going to be okay either way, because I know I'm walking in my purpose. That's our joy. And that's the beautiful thing about God, is that he provides such a sense of purpose, that if we can latch onto that purpose and walk with that in every aspect of our life, my goodness, it gives you such a sense of joy. That's why no matter what turbulent situation we might find ourselves in, when we're saturated and totally in our purpose, my goodness, there's joy in that. And so we want to get that for my wonderful friends here that aren't as big into faith. We need to find something outside of ourselves that's not another person to be our joy. Something that's bigger than humanity. Something that's just bigger than our individual lives. Finding something greater. And oftentimes we find so many people driven to humanitarian causes because they want to do something outside of themselves, because no matter what that calls, that'll keep me. Like, yeah, I might be struggling personally, but I know today I helped some kids somewhere get food for the night where they otherwise couldn't afford it. It's getting outside of yourself. And then I'm not going to read all those verses. We're going to see the email so you can have the reference. But we're talking about imperfect human beings. I'm going to say some things that are kind of painful, but it's okay. So there's a lot of so we're talking about the idea of the nature of humans, or what people are like. I want to help somebody out tonight, and this is going to be really helpful for us. People are not essentially good. I'm sorry, people are not essentially good. And people are like, well, that's not true, because I would never do this, I would never do this, I would never do this. Okay, I understand, but let's put it like this. We have the capacity of choice because we're all made in the image of God. And we have a conscience, and so we'll choose to do relatively good things, but essentially humans do these two things, and this guides our actions. One, we serve our passions, and we're restrained by different external forces. And what do you mean by that? Like a society. Like whatever society you live in, it's going to play a part in shaping how you behave. Like here, let's say us here now, right now, most of us would agree that it's wrong to steal. Stealing is wrong. You don't have to even be a Christian to believe that. Most people are like, stealing is wrong. It doesn't belong to you, so don't take it, right? That's here, now, in our society and our circumstances. But if you're in a situation where you have different passions or desires or different forces that are at play, your morality might be a little more fluid. Like I was watching an interview about someone who escaped from North Korea. And he said, yeah, this was this guy, he was publicly executed. He was killed by the firing squad. And this is why he died. He died because he stole from the government. And you're like, well, stealing is wrong, and I don't think it warrants public execution. That's a bit extreme, but stealing is wrong. Okay, but here's the man's context. The country is poverty-stricken, and a lot of people can't eat. And so he stole from the government to sell it to other countries so he could make money to buy food for his family. And so and I say that to say, is a lot of our decisions, a lot of things that we do, they're driven by our different passions that we have, our desires, but also by external forces, namely like a society, or there's certain societal norms that impact how we behave. And so I say all that to the point that I don't know if humans are essentially good. I'm not of that persuasion. I think we have choice, or we can do good or bad, and we have so many things vying for us to make a decision one way or another. And so, okay, well, Devin, why does that matter? Why did you have that big, long, little conversation there about all that? It's because when we realize that we're not inherently good, and that we do make mistakes, and that we are imperfect, and we are flawed, and humans have a tendency to be pretty self-serving, it helps us have more compassion for other people. This is how the Bible puts it. It says that, and I'm reading from Hebrews 4:15, it says that, for we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. So let us come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in that time of need. I'm going to add a couple more verses. It says in the following chapter, because they weren't chapter divisions in the Bible, so this is a complete thought. It says that for every high priest taken from among man is ordained of men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. Here you go, I want to highlight this. Who have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way, basically them that make mistakes, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. Modern English. But in modern English. In the Old Testament, they had these religious rituals, and they had a singular priest who did a lot of activities. But one of the responsibilities of the priests were to judge different situations. When there were discrepancies or handling, they're like a little local court, they would handle a lot of those little things. And he said he was able to have compassion when people did wrong, basically because he was compassed with infirmity, or he had an understanding of his humanity. He had an understanding that he himself was imperfect and he himself was flawed. Why does all that matter? Because when you're dealing with your partner, when you're dealing with anybody else, when you're talking to other people, it is important that we understand that we're flawed just as anyone else are. Which means we can just as easily make a mistake as anyone else. And when we realize just how broken or messed up that we can be as an individual, that should produce in us a compassion for other people. And so when we had our little thing that happened earlier, and there was this miscommunication, but aren't there times that I've miscommunicated with her? Aren't there times where I wasn't as clear as I could have been? Or, I have this really bad habit of talking really, really quickly and kind of expressing my ideas and have thoughts. And so maybe I could have been miscommunicated to her in times past. And so set her expectations in a weird place. Remember yourself. Remember the times that you fell short, or the times that you didn't measure up, or the times that you made a mistake when you're dealing with the other person. There's a psychologist, they have this quote that I really like. It says, "I don't think you have any insight whatsoever in your capacity for good, until you have some well-developed insight in your capacity for evil." We need to understand that we should allow, and this is what the Bible is getting at, we should allow our understanding of our imperfection to be gracious to other people. It's like a perfect example, it's like the parent who has the teenage kid. We're all teenagers at one point, and we all did stupid things when we were teenagers. Maybe not everybody. Maybe some people they were just killing life as a teenager. Good for them. You go ahead. But me, I was a dumb teenager. I did things that I wasn't supposed to do. And so now when I go to deal with my child, when I have one, I don't have one yet, but when I go to have kids and they're a teenager and they're like, Dad, I did this and this and this and this. I'm not going to bring down the hammer and be like, oh man, you about to get it, boy. You about to get this belt. And I don't have to do all that. Because I remember what it's like to be in their place, to make mistakes, and to fall short. And so now I can come to a place of compassion and with love lead them on in a better way. So, yes. That's all I have. That's my part. Thank you guys for your time. Yes.
So, now that he laid the groundwork for what leads to unforgiveness a lot of times in us, I want to now break down some myths about forgiveness. And the reason I go into these myths a lot of times is because we'll be sitting in a lecture, seminar, whatever, hearing all these great ideas, and a lot of times we're sitting there with this one hesitancy of like, yeah, this all sounds great, but and we get hung up on this one little piece. So one of the reasons I want to talk about these myths is because a lot of times we want to forgive somebody, but we get stuck. And we're like, I don't know how to do it, or I don't know if I really want to, like torn back and forth between it. So there's 3 myths that I really want to break down because I hear these a lot from individual people, but also from society. And so I really want to break down these 3. So the first one is that I cannot honestly forgive someone unless that person shows some remorse for what they did. It's like, we want to hear an I'm sorry, an apology, and we're like, I am not going to forgive you until I get that. It's gratifying. We want to be acknowledged. We want our feelings to be validated. It's understandable. But then we go around being bitter towards this person and harboring all this resentment, and it really affects us. And we're not able to let go of this hurt and what this person did because we're sitting around waiting for an apology. And that happens a lot of times in our relationships. It could be something small. We could just be the type of person that holds grudges, and we're always holding these grudges for all these little small things because we don't get an apology, and that builds up. Or it could be something huge. It could have been infidelity in a relationship, and the other person never showed remorse for it, so now we're no longer in a relationship, but we're harboring that resentment because we never got an apology or got that done. So I want to dispel this because we've already been hurt once, right? The person hurt us once. And now we're holding this and hurting ourselves even more because we're choosing not to let it go because we want that apology. And sometimes the question is the apology worth it that much to where you're willing to keep shooting yourself in the foot in the process and not choosing to forgive? And here I want to talk also about the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness means we're going to let go, we're going to move forward, we're going to choose not to harbor on it. Reconciliation means we're going to come together in the relationship and make things right, and let's keep going together. The problem is we get those mixed up sometimes, and we think that forgiveness always means reconciliation. But the thing is, it takes 2 people to reconcile, and sometimes our partner or our ex-partner no longer is not willing to participate in that, and sometimes we have to draw those boundaries and move forward in our life. But that doesn't mean that we didn't forgive the person. We can draw boundaries and still forgive the person, and that leads to the next one, which is if you really forgive someone, you can't hold the person accountable for their actions. I hear this a lot where it's like forgiveness is weak. Like, I feel like if I forgive the person, then I'm going to be a doormat. I'm going to get walked all over all the time. And the truth is, that's not real forgiveness either, because you can forgive somebody and still hold them accountable. For example, if your partner's going on a business trip to Vegas, and when they're in Vegas, they blow all the money in the bank account, and they come back and you have no money left, it's okay to be angry about that, and it's okay to have a little lack of trust surrounding money after that. It's okay if the next time they go to Vegas, be like, no, you're not taking the bank card, here's some cash for your expenses, and that's okay. It's okay to draw those boundaries. That doesn't mean you're not forgiving the person for what they did. You can move forward in your relationship, you can forgive the person. Unforgiveness looks like every time you get in an argument, after that you bring up the time that they blew all the money in Vegas and you hold it over their head every day. That's unforgiveness. But you can forgive the person and move forward in the relationship and also still hold them accountable. And a lot of times I see people getting caught up on that. So I just wanted to dispel that one. And then the last myth is that if you've really forgiven someone, that means you'll forget what they did. You hear this all the time. You got to forgive and forget, forgive and forget. That's what God does. God forgets our sin. That's what we got to do. Well, one, God is perfect. We're not. Two, I don't believe that God really forgets, like has amnesia. I think he chooses to let it go and chooses not to think about it. And that's more the model of forgetting that we should be doing. It's not that we forget what happened. That's impossible to do, especially if it's someone who we've been in a relationship with for years, have tons of memories with, and then they do something horrible. We can't just forget that and move on. Those memories are going to pop up. The emotions are going to keep popping up. But the thing is, we have to start making the conscious choice of I'm not going to let this hold me back. I'm not going to keep holding this over their head. I'm going to choose to kind of put it aside, put it away. But even if it comes back, that doesn't mean I didn't forgive the person. And that leads to this, which is the two types of forgiveness. So a lot of times we get these mixed up, where we think that forgiving is always the first one, which is emotional forgiveness. So emotional forgiveness is that nice, warm, fuzzy feeling that happens after an argument when you make up and everything's going great. It's kind of that honeymoon phase where there's flowers and butterflies and you made up and everything's good and I forgave the person. We're good to go. But the truth is that doesn't happen a lot of times. A lot of times it takes a really long time to get to that point to where you feel forgiving towards the person. So we may get stuck on this being like, especially if forgiveness is a huge value of ours, and being like, I really want to forgive this person, but I can't seem to forgive them, and that's because those feelings aren't there. But the truth is you can forgive someone and still feel that way. That's where the second type of forgiveness comes in, which is called decisional forgiveness. And this is acting as if you've forgiven the person. So say you and your partner get into an argument, it feels still kind of unresolved, but you've done everything you can to kind of work through it and resolve it, and you decide you want to move forward. Okay, maybe you still feel resentful or bitter or grudgy on the inside, but you're like, you know what, I love this person, I care about this person, I want to continue in this relationship, so I am going to choose to forgive them, even if I don't feel like it. This means that you're not going to keep giving them the silent treatment. You're going to start talking to them in a pleasant tone again. You'll go back to, if you pack their lunch every day in the morning, pack their lunch again. Whatever you did before, just acting as if you've forgiven them, and even if the feelings aren't there, a lot of times the feelings start coming as you start having positive interactions with your partner again. These feelings will start coming along with it. But say, okay, you weren't able to reconcile, and maybe this is an ex or someone in the past where you're still struggling with this with. Decisional forgiveness is choosing not to wake up every morning grumbling and telling all your girlfriends or guy friends or whoever every day about all this stuff that happened and complaining about it all the time. That's not being forgiving. But decisional forgiveness, and that is choosing, you know what, I'm not going to let this define my life. I'm not going to continually badmouth this person anymore. I'm going to choose to move forward and make that decision even if I'm not doing it. A lot of times the emotions do come, not always, but we'll talk about this process some more. So what I want to do now is walk us through a model for forgiveness. And when I say forgiveness, I'm meaning decisional forgiveness, because that's within our control. We can't control emotional forgiveness, but a model for forgiveness. The first thing that we have to do is acknowledge the pain. Because a lot of times we're like, you know what, I'm just going to pretend this didn't happen, and that's how I want to forgive. I'm just going to pretend this didn't happen and just move forward. The truth is, we can't really get healing that way, because we're just stuffing the emotions or pushing them away. And also, if we need to build boundaries to protect ourselves, we can't do that either. So the first step is to really acknowledge how the offense affected you. Acknowledge whatever pain, whatever hurt, whatever anger, sadness, whatever it is, have to acknowledge it. And that's the first step of moving forward. So after we've acknowledged it, acknowledged how it affected us, then that's where some of the stuff he was talking about earlier comes into play. Then we have to consider the other side of you. Because a lot of times when we're so wrapped up in our emotions and our distress and our frustration, that's all we see. And all we see is our perspective, and this is what happened. But the truth is, that's just one perspective of what happened. The other person probably saw something very different. So we have to take the time to, okay, now I'm going to take a pause now that I've acknowledged how I feel. I'm going to take a pause and think about what might have led the other person to do what they did. This is true for any situation, whether it's something really trivial, like changing all the pictures on my partner's slides, or whether it's something a lot bigger. We still have to take this step to acknowledge from the other person's perspective. So some things that we can do is, one, think about our partner's character. What do we know about our partner? For example, if he went and donated some money to some cause without consulting me, that might make me a little frustrated because I tend to be a little bit more frugal, it's a nice word, stingy is what I usually say, with my money. So I might get a little frustrated about that, start holding a little grudge, but I have to stop and think, you know what? No, he didn't do this to be malicious. He did this because he's a very generous person, and that's one of the qualities that I really like about him and his character. And I have to remind myself, okay, his character is not to be malicious. He's just a very generous person. And also consider external factors that may have influenced your partner's behavior. So this is a psychological principle that kind of shows how imperfect we are as humans, you could say, is that when we make a mistake, we usually blame it on whatever is going on around us in the environment. We usually blame the environment or blame something else. But when someone else makes a mistake, we don't do that. We usually blame that person's character and was like, it was their character, that was what was wrong. And social psychology has shown that without fail, that's usually what we do. And so knowing that, we have to counter that and intentionally try to think about what are some of the factors in the environment that may have affected them. Because I'm sure in my position, I'm thinking about all the factors that affected me. So I needed to give him the same grace and acknowledge those as well. So just put myself in his shoes, and once you do that, it's a lot easier to realize, you know, if I was in the same situation, if I had worked a long, hard day at work, if I had a cold and was just really tired, I might have snapped too, because, you know, it's human, and that's what we do when we're tired a lot of times. So this step is just to consider the other side. But then it's also helpful to remember our own forgiveness. So whether you're religious or not, I'm sure everybody here recognizes that you've been forgiven for something that you probably didn't deserve to be forgiven for. Whether it was as a kid or an adult, I'm sure we've all done really stupid things and had someone give us grace and be like, you know what, it's okay, I'm gonna let it slide. That feels really good. And the thing is, if we love our partner and really care about them, we probably want them to experience the same grace. Recognizing we've made mistakes in the past, we were imperfect, like he was talking earlier, and we have to realize and extend that grace, and that's a choice. This doesn't come naturally. This is where that decision comes in, of, you know what, I'm going to make that choice to forgive this person, even if I feel like they don't deserve it, because it's a gift that I've been offered, and it's a gift that I want to offer in return to my partner. So this is really where that choice and the decisional forgiveness comes in. And this is where we have to start acting as if we've forgiven them. So once we've made that choice, this is where we can't keep bringing it back up in every single conversation. We have to choose to just let it go and move forward. And this isn't easy. This is really hard to do, especially if we're not feeling it yet. But just, again, moving forward and walking forward as if we have. And then the next step is to repeat. Because emotions don't just resolve that easily. That's not how we work as humans. Our emotions pop back up, and they repeat over and over. And so it may take a while to start feeling that forgiveness, so we may have to go back to step number 2 or step number 3 and go back to, you know what? I need to remind myself again why they did it, because I'm getting caught up in my emotions again. Or I need to make that choice again. And we have to give ourselves grace in the process too, because it takes a while to get this down, and this is really hard sometimes. But forgiveness is a process. And forgiveness does take intentionality. And usually the more we practice this, the more we'll start having the emotions that go along with it as well. So that's really all I have in that process. Just conclusion, we all mess up at times. We all make mistakes. Forgiveness can be really difficult, but it is something that we have to choose. It's not fair to ourselves to keep shooting ourselves in the foot over something that someone else did. And also, especially if it's something minor, it's not fair to our partner either. And so if we want to continue in that relationship and continue reconciling with our partner, forgiveness is really important. And even if it was something in the past where we haven't been able to reconcile, forgiveness is still important for ourselves to move forward and move forward in relationships. So that's the conclusion. I'll toss it back over to Devin to wrap us up.
And I just want to take a second, just a little disclosure, just when it comes to dealing with just forgiveness and not forgiving someone. We don't want to give the appearance that this is just something that you just wake up and decide, I'm going to forgive today, and then it's going to be okay. It's challenging. I had an estranged relationship with a member of my family, and this particular individual did a lot of things that were not kosher, very bad. And for a very long time, I struggled within myself to forgive this person. Many years, even after converting and being a believer, and I was hearing these sermons about the importance of forgiving. I would hear it all the time, and so I'd have these people talking at me, and they say, forgive, 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 and the first thing that comes to my mind is, but you don't know what they did. And if I had the opportunity, they're going to get this elbow in their jaw, because what they did was wrong. They knew what they did was messed up. And so it is challenging, and when you're finding the strength to give grace to someone else, give grace to yourself also. And remember, I know this has been, I'm sure we've all heard this little adage, this little proverb, but when you forgive, it's for yourself. It's not for the other person. I'm sitting there stewing, angry, livid, and anything that reminds me of that person gets me instantly triggered. My blood pressure goes up. It's bad on my health. Chronically stressed out, thinking about how frustrating this person makes me feel. Anything that reminds them, it instantly gets me on 100. And the sad part is, at the end of the day, this family member hasn't even thought about me once. They're not concerned about me. They're not concerned about how I feel. They're not concerned about what they did. They showed absolutely no remorse. They know they were wrong. They just simply did not care. They did not care. They had no desire to show remorse and had no desire to make things right. And so with all that knowledge, I felt some type of way. And then it was then that I realized I have to let go of this, because I don't want what they did to me to control me. And that's what forgiveness is truly about. It's about releasing yourself from these different hurts and releasing yourself from these different pains, even though it is very challenging and it's very difficult. But the key thing is, it's not, the Bible talks about God being just. God is just. And what people reap, they will sow. Whatever wrong someone did, trust me, what goes around comes around. They're going to get theirs. It's not your responsibility to be the one to bring the hammer down. We're letting go for ourselves. I just want to add that 2 cents there. So,
I wanted to add one more thing that I meant to throw in too, with the emotions that keep coming back up. So I want to make a kind of a caveat. So if you've been in an abusive relationship that was very traumatic, sometimes those emotions and those memories can come back much more vividly and much more intensely, and those can be very hard to get past on your own. So I just want to make the disclaimer that if that is something that anyone here has experienced, or even anyone watching the thing online, it's okay to seek help for those type of things, to be able to work through that with a professional. So don't beat yourself up if you're trying to forgive someone that has been abusive, because that can be very hard to do on your own. So it's okay to seek help for that. So that's it.
good. So we're going to open the floor. Questions? Yes.
I just wanted to help you to fill in about the age-old saying about take poison, about if you're familiar with that saying, like when you, I'm sure you
you eat poison. You eat poison to poison the other person, but it's killing yourself. Basically.
Right, like by not forgiving someone, it's like you're taking poison that you're intentionally trying to give to them, and you're the one that's actually dying from it. Just that one just sits with me forever, and helps me forgive a lot.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I really like the practical, like what you said about like confront the, I guess like the hard emotions, like the pain, like acknowledge the pain. That's like the first step. Like really, like just acknowledging that it's there, and dealing with like the ugly emotion and owning it and like moving forward from that. I mean, that's hard. That's really hard. You know, like the first step, just big ugly elephant, just beat it head on.
I think that's one that keeps us stuck a lot of times, because we don't like dealing with emotions. They're not comfortable, they're really ugly, but we have to be able to deal with those emotions to move forward.
I have another question. So like, I know you mentioned that sometimes when there's conflict, some actions can be perceived as like minor or trivial. And my question is like, what's the best way to negotiate or communicate what's mutually agreed upon to be minor or trivial, when one person may think it's more deeply impactful, the other person thinks it's just minor or trivial. And the second thing is like, oftentimes, I mean, this may not be true for everyone, but it's true for me. Like sometimes it's hard to predict how you may react to a novel situation that you've never experienced before, and kind of like, is that okay? Is there, is that a defaulting like thinking, or what's the best way to one, like be prepared for how you may react to a situation that you're not expecting, and two, what's the best way to negotiate, conflict, whether it be deeply impactful or minor or trivial?
I have some ideas. You want to go first or me go first?
You
So I'll speak more to the first one. So that's where communication comes in. Communication is key in that situation. And so I'll just use this as an example, right? So let's say there's some altercation between the two of us. So between the two of us, she feels a lot more deeply than I do. She is a lot more in tune with her emotions than I am. And so a lot of times, and so when we're having discussion, I like to talk about ideas. And so we're talking about ideas and things get heated. To me, oh, it was just discussion and things are fine and we're good. But little do I know, she was getting very emotional the whole time and I was not even aware. And so it's just communicating. So once a scenario has happened, once a situation has gone down, it's from the get-go. The person who is hurt or whatever situation is, just verbalize how it feels to you. Like, there's many times where I'm like, this situation made me feel like this. I mean, I didn't even think it was a big deal. And then she responds, okay, but I really felt like this, this, and this. And so if you just communicate and just always encourage communication, that way each person can describe how they were impacted by it. And so this is when you double back. The person who you didn't think was a big deal, double back. And you come back around with, I understand that this has impacted you this way. Those weren't my intentions to make you feel this way. And then you start problem solving. Okay, well, what can I do going forward? Because I don't want to impact you in this type of way. This might not hurt me the same way it hurts you, but I genuinely care about you and I don't want you to be hurt. So coming back and making it that way, because you can't change how the situation makes you feel, but you can be concerned about your partner. So communication, lots of communication. And then to the second point, the second one was, there was two
What was
questions.
the one that didn't get answered?
Novel situations, yes.
I mean, I would say I don't think we ever really know how we're going to respond to new situations. I think it's okay to talk with your partner about kind of a game plan for how are we going to communicate if something happens, or how would you like to process it, or how much time do you want. It's okay to have those types of conversations, but I don't think we'll ever truly know how we're going to respond until something happens.
Because you expect to want to respond as if it's minor and it's not a big deal. And, ideally, every conflict that arises is minor. But, sometimes you're hit with a conflict that impacts you so deeply that you didn't expect it. And then, that's a hard, to me, that's a hard situation.
And so about that. So let's say you're having a series of conflicts and they're all minor. You guys agree that they're minor, and that's fine. You're able to work through it, you're using a lot of principles from the classes, and everything's fine. If you notice out of nowhere a situation happens and you respond disproportionately to the situation, or there's some huge response, that should be a note to you that, okay, hold on. There's something going on within myself that I need to really examine. We see just to make you know, just like a reference, like there's tropes in movies. So you have the whole Western movie. You see certain ideas, and when you see these certain things happening, you know, okay, this is the genre, this is the trope, this is the norm. But when you see something deviate, it attracts your attention to it. And so when handling conflict, this is how we normally handle conflict. But when a conflict happens and you find yourself responding in a way that you never have before, okay, well, let's unpack the situation. Let's see what there. Maybe there's some underlying hurts on somebody's side that needs to be taken a look at. Maybe there are some core principles and values that you have that felt like they were violated. I mean, that's the perfect time to really take a step back and look, okay, why was I so impacted by this? That's a perfect time for introspection on both parts. And then you can look, okay, so if this type of thing makes me feel like this, now you can kind of examine some related different situations to apply and help set up some boundaries going forward. That'd be my piece of advice. Those times when you blow up, okay, there's something going on the inside that needs some examination. Yes.
We have time for one more question? Sure.
When things are blowing up like that, would you advise maybe allowing like one party and the other party or both of them to agree to have like a timeout to let emotions decompress? Because I've seen that work, and then I've seen other situations where sometimes people might use it just to shut down the conversation.
Yeah, that's a good question, because timeouts do have to be used appropriately, and I think it's good ahead of time. Like, one of the keys to the timeout when you're walking away is you have to have a predetermined amount of time that you're going to come back. So everybody needs different amounts of time to process. So it's something good to talk about when you're not in a conflict. But if you need an hour, 30 minutes, you need to come back tomorrow morning, whatever, but have a set time that you're going to come back. That way you're not shutting down the conversation. That way you're making time to come back to it. Also, during the timeout, it's important not to just sit and stew on it the whole time, because that's probably not going to help. Go do something that you enjoy that's going to distract you and get your mind off and let out some steam or whatever during the timeout. That way when you come back, your emotions are calmed and you can think them through. So, thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all for coming out and joining us all these weeks. Please feel free to contact us if you ever have any more questions or any thoughts or even feedback for us about the class. And we have all of our information on the back table too, as far as our business cards and everything. So appreciate you all.